agree.
Right.
It doesn't bother. Oh, yeah. That's fine. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I'm very casual. Just
I don't remember how I've done it before.
yeah. This is my machine.
Yeah, with all of us, it's pretty casual.
Okay, good. Okay, perfect. Okay.
The benefits of a small
Yep,
town.
that's fine.
Right.
That's good.
Hey, Chuck.
How's everybody?
Hey, Evening, Chuck.
How's everybody?
All right.
Are you sure?
See, how you doing?
You see?
Yeah, I know. We're good. I know. I didn't see you before. I know. Long time no see. Just a while. How's life treating you? Pretty good. You still doing your education training or courses?
Yep, I'm gonna finish my MBA this summer.
The most people I've seen in a while.
Mhm.
So it's most people I've seen in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, this one could go on.
Fantastic. So that's a big accomplishment.
It's like a long time and short time all at once. So
I mean, how long
Like, are you wearing a rubber
it'll be 2.5
wedding ring?
Yeah, it's actually, my fingers must have shrunk, so I had to put it on my middle finger, came off in the shower. Yeah, it's silicone.
Yeah, rubber.
That's tough. I admire you for your
40 years ago, I told my wife I work in industry.
Right,
I will
lose a
wear-
finger.
and I won't wear a metal ring.
Yeah. My dad was the same way about neckties. He was a salesman, but he's always around manufacturing. We always wore the clip-ons.
Right.
steady and warm almost.
Yeah, but with this thing, yeah, I mean, it'll come right off. I'm sorry.
my daughter.
How are you, sir? Well, no, he's doing okay. Yeah, he's doing okay. Yeah, we're fine. We're fine. Yeah. How about yourself?
I went there.
You getting your
my dad went there.
fire department built, or your fire station built?
Yeah.
Actually, they put doors up on it yesterday and
Oh,
today.
man.
Does she know what type of home?
It's moving right
She
along.
knows what
I
she
bet
knows
you're
what she
excited.
wants to do, but it's been tough to find what she
Yeah,
wants.
come on.
Yeah.
New building, all that, new equipment. Come on, it's gotta be.
Yeah, it is. It's an exciting time.
Yeah, good.
But it's a lot of work.
Well,
That's okay. Somebody's gotta do it.
Well, designate, delegate, delegate.
Those things that you discuss the way. You have to make a decision. So
You're getting too old for that stuff. You make the decision, but don't do the work. Make the decision. Good to see you. Thank you, Ty.
make sure there's no mix up about that. I think what we ended up with is some of quite additional, but not a very.
Yes, sir. No.
When they get there, when you get there.
Who's that he's sitting with?
But this is just
Isn't that Mark down there?
No, I haven't seen Mark. No, that's not Mark.
I gotta get my glasses.
Oh, what? here tonight?
It's a lot of rain today. Let me wait and see what happens. But still.
A lot of information.
Way too many little things.
Every time I decide.
Is that the rezoning cannot move forward? So it's kind of, your requirements meet this kind of. Because I don't know what they're gonna do. It's just schedule.
But, yeah, you're right, I guess that would, compete the whole thing, yeah. But the good thing about it is the good thing about the waiver standards, you only have to meet one of them.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Verizon says it's 7 o'clock. First part of the agenda is call to order and pledge of allegiance. Stand if you may, if you can. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item on the agenda is review and adopt it. Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to adopt the agenda.
A second? Mr. Southern seconds. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Review and adopt the following minutes. The March 26th regular town planning board meeting and the closed session meeting.
I make a motion that both of those minutes be adopted as recorded.
Second?
I'll second.
Mr. Ron seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Public comment period. Each speaker must identify themselves, give their name and address, and each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Anybody want to say anything right now? None coming up. Closed session. Mr. Winfrey.
Yes, at this point, I guess I would recommend that the planning board adopt a motion to go into closed session for the purpose of consulting with me briefly to maintain the attorney-client privilege.
Okay. Chair will entertain a motion, so
I make a motion that we go into closed session under state statute, North Carolina GS 143.318.11A3 to confer with our counsel.
motion is up there. I'm looking for a second.
I'll second.
Okay. That was close. Ron, I think you beat everybody. Let's do a closed session, if you would.
You have to vote on it.
Oh, we need to vote. I'm sorry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The reminder. Okay, we're back in open session.
Probably have to go over the rules if you want to.
Yes. All right. I think for the benefit of the audience, it might be appropriate. Public hearing, waiver case, 26-02-BOA-00002. Avery, would you present this to us?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would you like to have
Right.
everybody sworn
Oh,
first?
sure.
Right,
before
we forgot to do that.
Forgot that one. All right, so.
Because this is a waiver case, would you explain why?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, because this is a quasi-judicial hearing, all of the evidence presented will be sworn testimony, unlike a garden variety rezoning case. So we will be asking anyone who intends or thinks they may be speaking on this case to be sworn. We have Bibles if here, anybody needs it. Our clerk to the board, Mason Winfrey, will be administering the oath to everybody before they begin. The statute says that you can present competent material and substantial evidence on the merits of the request. And so if it gets outside that scope, I may object to it, just if it's not relevant to the request. If there is an objection, the chair will rule on that objection. And if there's an appeal to that ruling, then the full board will weigh in on that objection. And with that, I think we're ready to have everybody sworn that wants to speak about it.
All right, everybody wants to speak, come on up.
How about standing where they are? Can they stand where they are? You want everybody
Well,
up?
we've got the Bibles and everything.
I got you.
Does everybody have to have a finger on the Bible?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Yeah.
All right. Avery, if you would.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to start off here, I'm going to preliminarily identify the property here. So the subject property for the waiver request is located at 7900 and 7906 US Highway 158. That's tax parcels 164094 and 164076. And they're located approximately 3,500 feet east of the intersection of US 158 and NC 68 North. In total, the two subject parcels comprise 39.04 acres. That's based on the Guilford County GIS map. And so now I'll get to the actual request. The waiver request in front of you is a request for a waiver from Development Ordinance Section 5-13.3J to allow submission of a Unified Development Plan, or UDP, showing a cul-de-sac that exceeds the maximum length established by the ordinance as part of the applicant's conditional rezoning case, which is identified as 26-01-PLBD-0002. So Development Ordinance Section 4-10.5A2 requires that rezoning requests for planned unit development districts be accompanied by a UDP, a Unified Development Plan, that has been reviewed and accepted by staff as consistent with the requirements of Article 5, which governs subdivisions, that section of the development ordinance. So as part of the applicant's conditional rezoning case, which proposes a rezoning from the agricultural district to the conditional zoning planned unit development residential district, for those two subject properties, a unified development plan was submitted to staff showing a cul-de-sac with a length of approximately 1,500 feet. That exceeds the maximum cul-de-sac length of 800 feet that's established in the development ordinance, specifically section 5-13.3. So staff is therefore unable to accept the UDP as submitted with that 1,500-foot approximately cul-de-sac length, because it's not consistent with the Article 5 as included in the ordinance. And that's what prompted the waiver request in front of you today. So I did want to note, the waiver, if approved, would apply just to the UDP, the Unified Development Plan submittal, and would only permit the applicant to move forward with the conditional zoning request. So it's not an approval to actually develop the parcel as shown. It's purely to allow staff and, for that matter, the planning board to accept the UDP as part of the rezoning application. And I did want to outline for you, just at the end here, so the grounds for waivers contained in the ordinance, I'll just recap those for you guys. So it says you may waive standards in the ordinance under one of the following circumstances. Number one, physical hardship, where because of the size of the tract to be subdivided, its topography, the condition or nature of adjoining areas, or the existence of other unusual physical conditions, strict compliance with the provisions of the article would cause unusual and unnecessary hardship on the divider. That's the first grounds provided in the ordinance for a waiver. The second is equal or better performance, where in its opinion, a waiver will result in equal or better performance in furtherance of the purposes of the ordinance. That's the second grounds for a waiver. Third is unintentional error, where through an unintentional error by the applicant, his agent, or the reviewing staff, there is a minor violation of a standard in the article where such violation is not prejudicial to the value or development potential of the subdivision or adjoining properties. Those are the three grounds for a waiver that the ordinance provides. And having recapped that, that concludes my staff report, and I am available for any questions you might have.
Thank you.
Yes.
One thing I'd like to add briefly, Mr. Chairman, is under our ordinance, whatever decision is made tonight can be appealed to the town council on the issue of the waiver. So a rezoning case, you'd only be making a recommendation to town council. Your decision tonight will be final unless there's an appeal, in which case the town council would deal with it after that appeal is made.
Okay. Any discussion from the board before I open up to the public? Questions? You had a question? No. All right. I thought you had a question for it. Who wants to speak first on this?
I guess it's proponents at this point.
Proponents, yes.
Good evening. Thank you very much. My name is Amanda Hodiern. I'm here as the attorney on behalf of the applicant, presenting the waiver request, as you've just heard from Mr. Tu. My office is located at 804 Green Valley Road, Suite 200 in Greensboro. I do have two witnesses I'm going to call. I imagine they can give their name and address when they come up, if that's okay. All right, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Winfrey. Other Mr. Winfrey, appreciate it. All right. So as you've heard from Mr. Tu and has been presented, this is a little bit of a unique proceeding that we're getting started with tonight. If we could go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So this is a waiver request, as you've just been told. So what does that mean in this context? Why are we doing this as this preliminary threshold issue to the bigger sequence of entitlements that this property owner is seeking? It's because of the length of the cul-de-sac, as you've been told. So when I say it's because of the length of the cul-de-sac, it's actually only about the length of the cul-de-sac. So importantly, this waiver, as you've heard, and it's worth restating and emphasizing, it's completely a threshold matter, a preliminary matter to get us to evaluating a rezoning. And then if that were to be approved, that gets you to evaluating a site plan. So it's very important to understand that this proceeding does not equal approval of the rezoning. It doesn't equal approval of a preliminary plat for a subdivision. It doesn't equal approval of this road getting built. It doesn't equal approval of any kind of construction drawings or land disturbance permits or any of that. It simply is a matter to allow Mr. Tu, as a staff member, to have the authority to review a unified development plan. Because the way your ordinance, the town of Stokesdale's ordinance, is written, staff only has the power to look for compliance with Article 5. Now, Article 5 in the UDO, just like every other zoning ordinance, contemplates the fact that, we need opportunities to make the ordinance fit the dirt, right? So we know there's variances, we know there's waivers, we know there's staff modifications. All of these things exist because Article 5 doesn't always fit perfectly. So that's why this opportunity is here. In this case, the uniquity is that we have to do it first so that Mr. 2 or anyone else in his position can properly bring that in. So it's a very narrow inquiry at this point to say, does this cul-de-sac meet the test that we're about to walk through? We have to clear our minds of anything else that we know could come later, if that makes sense. We're only looking at it as an evidentiary, fact-based analysis of the test. If we could go to the next slide, please. So the cul-de-sac length requirement, the one and only thing we're here to talk about right now. This is in Stokesdale's UDO, Unified Development Ordinance, Section 5-13.3. You can read that here. It's in your staff report. It says that a cul-de-sac maximum length can be and that's measured from the distance of the cul-de-sac once it leaves the right-of-way of a through street. And that's why I added this diagram. So it's not always just from where it comes off the main road, i.e. US 158, all the way to the end. No, it's measured from the last public right-of-way that it intersects with. So showing that here. So that distance, per your ordinance, cannot exceed 800 feet. Unless you're in a critical watershed, then it can be 1,600 feet. We're not in a critical watershed here. But it is an interesting notation to note that your ordinance already contemplates that there are going to be competing priorities here. And sometimes it's more important to serve a different priority than this cul-de-sac length. So does everybody understand the requirement and how it's measured? We can come back to this with questions if we need to. Next slide, please. So you've heard the standard, 800 feet. What is the proposal that caused Mr. 2 to flag this and get us into this waiver request? It's the preliminary design length as shown on the Unified Development Plan that was submitted as part of the rezoning request. Again, a plan development rezoning requires a UDP, a Unified Development Plan. That's a very specific preliminary layout of how the zoning would operate, and that's something that staff reviews. But when he saw this, he noticed the cul-de-sac length, and so that's why we needed a preliminary waiver to allow him to proceed with his evaluation. So here is that preliminary design drawing, drawn by professional surveyor and land planner, Mr. Bill Greco, who you'll hear from as an expert witness, and that's in your packet. So as you can see from those plans in front of you, the proposed preliminary design is 1,539 feet. That is in excess of 800, so that's why we're here. That's the one and only issue. If we could go to the next slide, please. So why a waiver? Because your Unified Development Ordinance, the UDO, specifically provides this as the mechanism for the circumstance we're in. So we're following the ordinance. This is the process we're supposed to go through when we have this circumstance. We know that because of Section 5-12 that says waivers. When we dig into 512, 5-12.1 expressly says the planning board may approve waivers to standards in this article. So what is this article? It's Article 5, the subdivision ordinance. Check, we've met that. What is standards in this article? It is the cul-de-sac length requirement that is at issue. The fact that it exceeds that 800 feet. So check, it's a standard in this article. So what is a waiver? If we go to the UDO's definitions, 2-1.7 CV tells us that it is official permission from any, sorry, I'm trying to read sideways here, from any designated body other than the Board of Adjustment to depart from requirements of this ordinance. So that's how we know it's the planning board. It's the designated body who evaluates the request relevant at that moment other than the BOA, Board of Adjustment. So as you can see, we've met all the requirements for 5-12.1 that this is a proper waiver. So if we could move to the next slide, please. Now we know why we're here. Now we know that we're properly pursuing the right avenue. So what is the task before you? What is the analysis that you have to apply to the facts? As you heard from Mr. 2, there's three separate and distinct grounds that the board can find, the applicant can claim or assert to have a waiver granted. The first is physical hardship. The second is equal or better performance. The third is unintentional error. We're not asserting unintentional error, so we won't be talking about that one. The primary assertion that we're making is physical hardship. So physical circumstances, I'll just read it exactly into the record, where because of the size of the tract to be subdivided, its topography, the condition or nature of adjoining areas, or the evidence or the existence of other unusual physical conditions, strict compliance with the provisions of this article would cause unusual and unnecessary hardship on the subdivider. So, do physical attributes, physical conditions interfere with the applicant's ability to just apply the ordinance as would otherwise be done? We could go to the next slide, please. So we're going to look at that. This is a slide screenshot taken from a GIS layer from the Guilford County Geographic Information Services platform. That's going to be applicant's Exhibit A. If I could approach, I'm going to hand that up for you guys and for the record. So as you can see from your exhibit, again, what we're looking at here is lifted exactly from Guilford County's GIS tool that provides parcel information, topography information, streams, wetlands information, dimensional information, parcel, subject property delineation, that sort of thing. So what we can see here are the subject properties at issue, 7900 and 7906 US Highway 158. Two separate parcels. You see them outlined in red. They stack on top of each other and create an upside-down L, if you will. The property is long and narrow. It has a very distinctive and unique shape in that regard, and it has a very specific set of dimensions. So to get into that and why all of this matters, the other thing I'll point out is that you also see the wetlands inventory. That is the name of the layer on Greensboro GIS that's turned on here. So you can see how that applies to not only the subject property, but the surrounding area. So starting first in the upper right-hand corner, you see the swath of green. That's a wetlands area. That means an area that has to be protected because it is it's wet, as it's aptly named. It's wet. It stays wet, and is an important aspect of the topography and environmental system to maintain proper drainage, permeation of water flow, and that sort of thing. So those are protected. The blue areas are those stream corridors where we have perennial streams that flow, or intermittent streams in some cases. But in either regard, these are there, they're known, so they're mapped on this layer, and we can see how they impact the property. I want you to note the blue stream that flows through the underside of the L, if you will, and bifurcates the property into about a third, a lower third, and then you've got the 2/3 above it in the remaining half of the L. We're going to talk about that. So take note of that. Take note of where it carves off the other areas as it flows diagonally from the town core, the intersection, all the way up to the northeast. So now that we've familiarized ourselves with shape, layout, configuration, environmental features of the site, I'd like to call William Bill Greco to the podium, not the box, to offer his expert testimony on how all of this applies when he, as a professional, takes all this into account and lays out property. So before he gets into that, if you could, Bill, give us a little bit on your qualifications and your experience so that we can get you qualified.
Bill Greco, my address is P.O. Box 347 in Oak Ridge. I'm a professional land surveyor, partner in Land Solutions. We are a land planning design consulting firm. This is our 29th year in business. Specifically in the town of Stokesdale, we have a significant number of similar cases and have worked in every facet of this ordinance and are familiar with this waiver process within the town as well.
So for clarity, in your job description, you lay out subdivisions like we see on the site packet. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. If we could go to the next slide, please. So this is an inset of what you have in your packet, which is Mr. Greco's layout for the subdivision. We're going to make that applicant's Exhibit B. So if I could give that to Mr. 2 so he could mark that as Exhibit B, but you all already have it in your record, so I didn't physical attributes that I just went over and how those affected and impacted his site design.
If you folks look at what's on the screen, I think we've accurately described the unique shape of the property. We've identified some of the environmental constraints. And earlier, you heard us speak about potentially a third of the property being accessible and ready for development. So that's where you see the proposed lots and the proposed streets. Starting out at US Highway 158, we have a very narrow section there of street frontage, approximately 60 feet. You'll see the street going back. It's roughly 400 feet, that narrow little leg that goes down there. So when you think about 800 feet being a maximum, we've already gone through about 400 feet before we ever really get to the property proper, if you will, where we can start thinking how could this parcel be developed. So with those two big pictures out of the way, we're looking at a third. We know we've got a pretty straight, narrow entryway in there, no other real options there. We then begin to look at the ordinance to see what zoning district may provide standards that would allow us to develop what is essentially that narrow rectangular corridor. Bearing in mind we don't really want to go any further north to get into an environmentally sensitive area. There's no real potential up in the wetland area. There's some flood zone up there as well, some stream buffers and some other things. So with all that said, we did circle back to what the ordinance provides us, what we're used to seeing in Stokesdale and surrounding environs, and that is the PDR district. And the way it's shaped, if you look at that, to get developable, buildable lots that are cohesive and have a professional design and something that fits in with the ordinance, this is the end result. We don't have 100 acres that's really wide to develop a street network. To be candid, once you get past the choice of the zoning district, this isn't a super hard design. It's a narrow rectangle that's really constrained. There's nowhere to go adjacent either to tie into any other networks.
Can you tell us the width at the widest point?
I believe it's slightly over 400 feet. So at the end of the day, this is where we landed from a design perspective. Circling back to the waiver and the 800 feet, off the top of my head, prior to 160D, the waiver request for the length of a street in Stokesdale, this isn't the first time this has been here. I can think of two examples right now that are within walking distance of here, B&G Court being one. There's a cul-de-sac in Treeline Trails subdivision, which is another one. Those are the two I can think of off the top of my head with regards to this waiver request. So certainly we think if you look at criteria number one that needs to be analyzed in order to grant a waiver, certainly feel like we meet that to a T. Equal or better performance, again, you can go up to 1,600 feet in a watershed. This will perform the same or better as a 1,600 feet road. So we're kind of in the middle with where we're at. We're over 800, but we're less than 1,600. So we're not asking for any extreme deviation, just a simple waiver on the length.
So to summarize, is it your expert opinion that the narrowness and the long linear shape of the property configuration mean that only one road in and one singular road, as opposed to a spine with spurs coming off or a grid network, is the only way to access the property?
That's correct. We have if you work from east to west, we have a property boundary. Then we have a narrow corridor that is defined by either required drainage easements or stream buffers. So that's really the only place we have to be from a development perspective.
Okay, and so do those stream corridors preclude you from moving out to the side and trying to seek connectivity from other parcels?
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you. If we could go to the next slide, please. So putting that in context, when we drop the site plan onto the subject property, into the surrounding area, looking at how those stream corridors traverse not only our little upside down L, but the whole area, you can see that the cul-de-sac stops at the stream corridor where it needs to. There's no room on this narrow property to circle back down or to have any kind of grid. There's no reason to go west because it meets the stream corridor. We can't go north because it goes over the stream and then hits wetlands again. Even if we were to go east, there's a subdivision already pending there, so nothing to connect to, but even if there was, it only gets us back into the stream corridor that you see running north. So it still doesn't get you a nice wide network on this particular property. So just a different way to look at and contextualize the testimony you just heard from Mr. Greco. I'd like to call Kami Johnson next, just to talk about, and if we could go back to the previous slide, we're going to get a little out of order here. So Mr. Greco touched on this a little bit. We're going to summarize in a minute. We feel that we've certainly met the burden of proof for physical hardship, but in the alternative, or in addition, if you want to look at it that way, there is certain evidence we want to put forward for equal or better performance, because if you look at the spirit and intent of this requirement for a maximum length of cul-de-sac, that is about, and Mr. Tu can opine on this as well, that is about a fire safety standard. It's about how far out do we want to go before there's a proper way for bigger vehicles to be able to turn around without going in someone's driveway. How far out do we want to plan for that to be able to happen? So, Mr. Kami, if you could please come to the stand, give us your name and address for the record.
Kami Johnson. I live at 7769 NC Highway 68 North Stokesdale.
And are you a principal of KRC Development LLC?
I am.
And would you be the developer or one of the developers making the decisions for the layout of this property?
I would be.
Okay. And can you tell me about a conversation you had with the fire department staff from Guilford County about creating a alternative compliance means here that would establish an equal or better performance?
I'll be glad to. I wish Todd and his first lieutenant were still here, but apparently they got called out. But I did meet with Todd Gaulden, the Stokesdale Fire Chief, early last week. And we went over this sketch plan that all of us are looking at. Todd, first and foremost in his mind, is fire safety. It's certainly something that we want to pay attention to as well. The Stokesdale ordinance says, in the fire part of that, it says fire hydrants at 800, maximum of 800 foot on center. So in theory, you could do this with 2 fire hydrants easily. In meeting with Todd early last week, we agreed to work with him. And I hate putting words in his mouth. I wish he were here telling you that, but we agreed to work with him in the placement of the fire hydrants as well as we can. Obviously, this plan will have to be sent through TRC and the Guilford County Fire Marshal, along with the town's water system engineers. So there's lots of eyes that have to look at it, not just Todd's. But we agreed to add a 3rd fire hydrant if that helped him in some way. And we also agreed, which is not shown on this drawing, but we've agreed to put a turnaround. Last week when I was talking to Todd, it was about halfway down. We were going to slide the units on the right-hand side this way, just enough to put a turnaround for a fire truck. And
so to clarify, is that on the west or the east side?
That would be on the east side, as we are, yes, east side. A turnaround that a truck could turn around. He's concerned about having to back too far or whatever for fire trucks. So with those 2 concessions on our part, Todd, again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think he's
satisfied that he wouldn't have a problem with this as, as I've presented.
Or stated another way, you've agreed to meet the requests of Mr. Todd
Yes.
Gatlin.
We get here tonight, and Todd, just want to be very clear, Todd says, I think we can do with 2 fire hydrants, but we will get together and work that out, and I agree. And now, instead of having to turn around halfway down, he said, let's put it right there where the units start. So this is a moving target, but the point of the conversation is that we're willing to work with the fire department and accommodate so that, we end up with a good fire-safe development.
Thank you. And of course, the witnesses are here for questions, but just to wrap up and summarize, the point of getting into all that is to highlight and emphasize the fact that, again, this is a preliminary threshold matter. We're simply asserting the evidence and everything we know at this point in the game to assert that this is a proper and thoroughly vetted matter that can be released to go forward to Mr. 2 so that he can then run it through the TRC process, the technical review process that gives the final look, not only by the fire department, the fire chiefs, the fire marshals, but everyone else. So physical hardship and equal or better performance has been contemplated and can be ascertained here through the technical process. So if we could go to the last slide, please. No, there we go. So to wrap up, as you know from your attorney, from your staff report, the task before you is to evaluate, have you heard sufficient evidence of a competent, material, relevant, or substantial nature to find that there are, in fact, physical constraints here that do create a hardship. So just want to summarize that we have presented a true and accurate GIS data platform from the Guilford County platform that shows the physical constraints on the property, its shape, its configuration, its narrow adjacency to a public right-of-way, its interaction with steep topography, stream corridors, and active wetlands on the site. We have presented expert witness testimony from a licensed engineer with his sealed site plan, evidencing the way that site planning principles and the Stokesdale ordinance overlay onto that situation of physical conditions that we looked at on GIS. We've also heard evidence from the decision maker, the principal of the land development firm that would be the one who could put this into play, on how he is willing to provide equal or better performance at the guidance of the expertise of the fire department for Stokesdale and Guilford County. So we've evidenced all of those things through the proper standard and would ask that this item is found to be a candidate of physical hardship for the waiver. And again, all that means is that the UDP can go through the process. It doesn't mean that it's a done deal. It doesn't bind you to have any certain opinion one way or the other on everything else you hear after this. It is a unilateral blinders on analysis simply about the cul-de-sac against the standards we've discussed tonight. So I'm here for questions. Mr. Greco's here. Mr. Johnson's here. And we're happy to dig into any of the exhibits or any of the testimony. Thank you.
Anybody else would like to speak for or against this? Nobody answering? Any questions from the board now? I've got one. Will you guys lay out where you were talking about a turnaround for a truck that's not shown on this? Sure. Sounds like there's 2 alternative locations you guys have come up with.
Mason, can you give us the drawing?
That exhibit back up, Mason?
Give us a drawing. Back one more. There you go.
Our initial conversations with the chief, we were looking right in here. I can't really read the lot numbers on this.
Yeah, what lot numbers would you be talking about?
About halfway down.
12, give or take 12.
All right.
That was our initial conversation in 3 hydrants. And as you heard from Mr. Johnson, upon further review
other questions from the board?
Just for clarification, so if you do put the turnaround in the middle, you would be eliminating one lot?
No.
No, you're not eliminating
No.
anything, okay. Sorry.
No, it wouldn't.
If this is determined to be the final location of the turnaround, I'll take these. I do have a little room to move them.
Oh, you just move it down.
I'll create it
Or the other one's
Okay.
up, I think.
So same number, okay.
either way.
And just to clarify, this is preliminary. Even if it were to move on to rezoning, rezoning is only permission to try. It's not a mandate. So, you know, all the other things would have to come together perfectly to not lose a lot for any reason along the way. Thank you.
Mr. Winfrey, can we have a conditional waiver based on the fire department agreeing with what has been offered?
I think it would be permissible for you to say that we will grant the waiver on the condition that a turnaround is located at a point satisfactory to the fire department. I think that'd be a condition.
Yes, the applicant would be amenable to that condition. Thank you.
Is staff in concurrence?
With which aspect?
With the waiver, with the conditions?
I had a question for Chuck about how the rezoning might be handled.
Okay,
The-
all right, that's fine.
If the waiver were to be approved conditionally.
But given that we're dealing with the recommendation, if they get to the
Right.
rezoning question, this board only makes a recommendation in any event to the town council.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if it changes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
All right, well, Chuck, are you guys
I think
done with your
I think we're-
discussion?
I mean, I would like some additional clarification
Okay.
on how it works. But I'm not
Okay.
the decision-making, you know,
You mean how the,
I just have
how
questions.
the rezoning would work?
Yeah. To be clear, so my concern is just so if you grant the waiver conditionally on the UDP or the sketch plan being revised to show that turnaround, then what are you reviewing tonight? Because the rezoning is integrally tied to the sketch plan of the UDP, and maybe,
That's not the condition, as I understood it. I understood the condition to say, subject to the applicant working with the fire department personnel and, you know, putting in the turnaround and the hydrant spacing that they deem appropriate. And so that deeming of appropriate, that opportunity to work with is already built into the process. It happens at TRC anyway, when the UDP comes forward. So it's not subject to a revision, it's subject to working the process, as we would have to anyway. And we're just saying that, you know, we've had those preliminary conversations. We know what he's looking for. We've already evaluated whether or not it can be done and know it can be. So we're very comfortable agreeing that we can, you know, knowing that that's the burden to be able to, you know, get his approval come TRC time.
I think this is cause for some clarification to be made. So under the new Stokesdale, the revised Stokesdale ordinance, it's a little bit streamlined. So the sketch plan that's included in the rezoning is part of the UDP. The UDP is required now as part of the plan unit development rezoning. And so it's already gone through the TRC review and been approved conditionally through that contingent on the waiver being granted. So it would not be, that is kind of what causes my concern, because theoretically, the UDP included with the rezoning is supposed to be the final, and if it
And
needs to still be updated.
Thank you for that clarification. What I was speaking to was post zoning. If zoning is approved, again, zoning is not a mandate. It's only permission to try. We still have to submit and meet and get an approved preliminary plat. And so that goes through again. UDP doesn't just send you straight to construction drawings. So there would
Right.
still be an opportunity for this check and additional scrutiny to be applied.
I guess that's true. It just depends on whether the plan is substantially changed from what's approved on the UDP as part of the rezoning, if it comes to that. You see what I mean?
I do, but I think I would submit that's no different than any time. That's always the risk of site plan zoning.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're comfortable with that. I think we understand that to be the nature of the beast regardless.
Okay.
Are you guys in agreement then?
I think so.
And then, and if, before it goes to, before the rezoning goes to town council, it may be that they're able to, make an amendment to that, to actually locate where that turnout's gonna be.
All right. Now I'm supposed to close the hearing?
Yes. If there's no other no other questions for the applicant or.
Are there any other questions from the board, or anybody else want to speak now or forever hold it, please, because we're going on. Chair will entertain a motion to close the hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we close the open hearing.
Second? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Good. Now, Chair will entertain a motion to either approve or deny this waiver.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the waiver, case number 26-02 BOA 00002, with the conditions that the developer work with our local fire department in adding an additional fire hydrant if deemed necessary, and/or a additional turnaround on the property, again, if deemed necessary.
Then, second?
Second.
All right, Mr. Curtis seconds. Let's take a vote.
Any other discussion of that?
Well, okay, we've got a motion. We have a second. Do we have
Any
to have
discussion?
discussion? All right. Mrs. Naylor?
Aye.
Mr. Crawford?
Aye.
Mr. Southern?
Nay.
Mr. Gentry?
Aye.
And I vote nay. But it passes. All right.
Next item on the agenda?
Next thing, conditional zoning case, number 26-01-BD-0002. Avery, will you present this to the board?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Subject property for this rezoning request is the same as the subject property for the previous waiver request that we just heard. So the request here is to conditionally rezone those subject properties, same as the previous case, from their existing AG agricultural zoning district to the CZPDR conditional zoning planned unit development residential zoning district with the following conditions. The proposed use conditions for the rezoning request are limited to two-family dwellings, twin homes, or duplexes as identified in the development ordinance. The proposed development conditions are maximum number of dwelling units shall not exceed 46. If approved, the Unified Development Plan submitted with the rezoning request that you can see in your packets would govern setbacks, height restrictions on the property, and all development on the property also must substantially conform to the UDP. There is also a note, if you are reading along in the staff report, there's a note there about the waiver request that you just heard. But I'll just skip that because we just went through that process. As far as the character of the area of the subject property, it's characterized by a mix of uses. There's residential, there's agricultural, there's commercial uses in the area. On this property, there's currently just single-family detached dwelling and accessory structures, but I'll give you a brief rundown of what's kind of in the surrounding area, which Amanda kind of did for the previous case as well. So to the north, there is, it's predominantly residential and rural residential. There is the proposed Greenstone Ridge twin home development immediately northwest of this subject property. To the south, there's residential and commercial predominantly. To the east, there's the proposed Norman's Place subdivision, so also residential. And to the west, it's predominantly, I would say, rural residential or agricultural. I did reach out to Guilford County Schools for this request, just for an impact statement on public school facilities. They estimated that if the rezoning is approved, Stokesdale Elementary would see an estimated increase of 5 to 7 additional students. Northwest Middle would see an estimated additional 4 to 6 students, and Northwest High would see an estimated additional 4 to 6 students as well. See what else we got here. As far as transportation conditions, US 158 is classified as a major thoroughfare in the adopted thoroughfare and collector street plan. The annual average daily traffic for US 158 is 5,722 vehicles per day per the 2025 traffic count. Let's see here. As far as what the Stokesdale future land use plan says about the property, designates the property, it's kind of split designation. So the southern portion of the property is designated as professional and manufacturing corridor that just follows 158. The northern portion of the property outside of that corridor is designated as residential. So the requested rezoning is inconsistent with the future land use map designation of professional and manufacturing corridor, because that designation is primarily intended to accommodate office and manufacturing uses. However, the request is consistent with the future land use map designation of residential, which again covers the northern portion of the property, because the proposed zoning would limit the use of the property to residential uses, and the resulting density would be comparable to that envisioned within that residential designation. Therefore, if the request is approved, future land use map amendment to the residential designation would be required for the southern portion of the property that's currently in the professional and manufacturing corridor. The requested rezoning is reasonable, contingent on approval of that waiver request, which is now completed, because it would enable residential development in proximity to the town core, thereby providing housing opportunities for residents and supporting nearby commercial uses. Additionally, the proposed zoning conditions would limit development to 46 dwelling units, resulting in a gross density of 1.18 dwelling units per acre, which is comparable to the gross density of 1.09 dwelling units per acre permitted under the RS40 zoning district, which is present in the surrounding area. The requested rezoning is also consistent with the overall pattern of development in the area, like I said, which includes another proposed twin home development located immediately northwest of the subject property, that's the Greenstone Ridge, as well as a residential subdivision located immediately to the east, that's Norman's Place. Finally, the subject property has direct access to US Highway 158, which again is classified as a major thoroughfare that would provide sufficient transportation infrastructure for development on the property. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the request. And that concludes my staff report. I am available for any questions.
Okay. Are there any questions from the board for Mr. Tu? Would anybody like to speak for or against this rezoning?
Good evening. Thank you, Amanda Hodiern, again for the applicant and as authorized agent for the property owner. 804 Green Valley Road, Suite 200 in Greensboro. Thank you. If we could go ahead and jump right to the first slide, please. So the summary of the request, just to lift up and emphasize the basics here, as you've just heard from Mr. Tu, the entirety of the subject property, just over 39 acres, comprised of 2 separate parcels. Existing zoning is AG, agricultural. The proposed zoning is conditional zoning, planned development, residential. So a couple different layers there, and we'll unpack that. It allows a maximum of only 46 homes. Again, as I alluded to in the previous hearing, that's not a mandate, it's not a guarantee, it's permission to try for no more than 46. So if the engineering goes, goes a different way and you could get 56, it's capped. If it goes a different way and you only get 36, that prevails. So that's how that maximum works. The other condition is the Unified Development Plan that we talked about, as a procedural aspect of the previous case. The Unified Development Plan is a zoning sketch plan, essentially. Importantly, it is not a preliminary plat. It's not a construction drawing, meaning it doesn't show all of the detail that ultimately is required to develop a subdivision. It's a preliminary amount of detail simply to give the community, the staff, you all, your colleagues on town council, the transparency and predictability to understand how this planned development residential would work on this piece of property. Why is that required? It's because all planned developments can be different as applied to the piece of property they're on. So that would be a lot of, abstract mental gymnastics if we didn't see it on paper. We need to see how it would be applied, and we need to know that that's a firm commitment. So that's how the Unified Development Plan works. It doesn't mean that it's done and it moves to permits after zoning. It means that it shows the basics, and then the engineers and developers can move forward to submit commensurate with that UDP if the rezoning is approved. That's important because it means details like a turnaround or fire hydrants come later. It doesn't mean they don't happen or they're not thought about. It means that that level of detail is looked at later by the rigorous staff review. Again, maximum number of homes being limited to 46. When you work that out with the acreage math, that comes out to a density of just 1.1 units per acre. So less than 1.2 units per acre. Very much, that's commensurate with an RS40 zoning. It meets the primary future land use plan designation of residential, as you've heard. We're going to look at that in more context here in a moment. So if we could go to the next slide, please. This is the subject property in wide view. We did talk about this a little bit in the previous hearing, but right now I want to talk about it from a land use standpoint and a planning standpoint. You see the red star indicating where we are on the map. This is not GIS. This is Google Maps, because on Google Maps we can see all the businesses and all the other things and activity going on in the area. So the red star here, you see where we are, of course, on Highway 158, traversing the other direction, kind of diagonally north-south. That's Highway 68, of course, 158 and 68 forming the major crossroads town core of Stokesdale. So all along Highway 158, because that is a major corridor, travel corridor, not just for people within Stokesdale, but people moving through Stokesdale, people leaving Stokesdale to go to work, people coming home back to Stokesdale from work. It is a major corridor in the area. So what do we put on our corridors? Our goods and services. So you have a lot of activity going on here. You've got restaurants, you've got car sales, you've got employers, you've got a school, you've got your just off of that corridor where we are right now, your town hall complex with your great town park system, all the activity that goes on there. So we've got a lot going on this 158 corridor. As we look to the east, we have, of course, some industrial employment providers. As you move north, you've got more residential and agricultural property. So important to remember the context that we're in, not only of surrounding land uses, but our transportation network and how important that is when we think about what use makes sense where. So if we go to the next slide, please. This is now moving back to the GIS because here we can look at the parcel lines. So now that we know and remember in context everything that's around us, how all the roads serve the area, let's fine tune and hone in on exactly where our parcel boundaries are and how we fit into that fabric that I just described. And you can see that here, of course, we're really just due north from where we're sitting right now on the other side of Highway 158. If we could go to the next slide, please. So this is our existing zoning pattern. You heard this described to you, you read it in your staff report, but visual is always better, so let's look at that in context. As you've heard, the subject property is zoned AG, but we've got residential in the form of RS30 there to the east. We've got some PUD zoning, PDR, another twin home project that was approved in 2025 to the northwest. We've got some red to the northwest, part of an older PD mixed use development that was approved many years ago. And then, of course, we've got the Highway 58 corridor with lots of red and purple. That's your retail, that's your goods and services, that's your industrial employers. And you've got some blue, that's your P&I, public and institutional, for the schools, the parks, the town hall. So in other words, the zoning supports what we just described. It's a fabric of a lot of different uses, a thriving hub being the crossroads and the town core of the Stokesdale community. You also notably have water utility running in both 68 and 158, so it makes sense that you would have all these vibrant uses, these residential projects popping up in those places where the investment has been made for the water utility. That's exactly what you would expect and want to see follow that type of investment. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So you're familiar with this by now. This is the proposed Unified Development Plan. Again, all that is a rezoning sketch plan that is a requisite part of a plan development request. So because we are asking for the zoning district of plan development conditional, that conditional is not just the commitment to only build twin homes, single-family attached twin homes, to limit them to no more than 46 units, but also to pursue that in compliance with this sketch plan that you see here. So you see 46 units, you see the proposed access, you see the proposed road network, you see the extent of the development, i.e. it's not going to go past the stream, it's not going to go up into the broad side of the L. So you see all of those limitations and contextual aspects that would have to carry forward if the rezoning were approved and would have to be a part of any further submissions, or it's not going to pass the next part of the process. So that's how this applies and governs and becomes the law of the land and part of the zoning ordinance on this particular piece of property. Of course, as you know, Mr. Greco's here if we have any questions about the layout. Again, this is not near as much detail as he'll have to do and the engineers will all have to do when it comes time to try and get a preliminary plat approved. This is merely showing the prescribed aspects of your ordinance that are required at this stage. So if we could go to the next slide, this is just calling out a few details of that site plan. It does include right-of-way dedication on Highway 158. That's how we get that right-of-way without you all having to go out and pay for it. It happens when development comes in. The developer dedicates it. Building heights limited to 35 feet. That's important because we want to make sure that there's a commitment to keep this in keeping with the character of single-family homes and the residential vernacular that we're used to seeing in Stokesdale. One access point, as you've seen, maximum built-upon area. That's important. We want a low-density development here. What that basically means is low impervious surface. The threshold to be that is 24% impervious. So that would have been 9.37 acres in this context. What we're actually proposing, our actual proposed impervious surface, is only 14%. It's down at 5.53 acres. So this is a great manifestation and a great tool to really understand and appreciate the extent of that development being limited to that bottom third of the property. Stopping at the stream not only keeps us from impacting that stream corridor, but it also keeps our built-upon area or impervious surface down, keeps the extent of the development limited, keeps that low-density option. All the open space will be commonly held and controlled and maintained in a homeowners association. So one thing you do want to think about when you see that much open space is, well, what happens afterwards? Who's going to maintain and control that and make sure that it stays a benefit and an asset? That's where the HOA comes in. It's all commonly held. There's a deed from the landowner developer to the HOA so that they are the owners of the open space. Required parking is met on site for each home. This is like any single-family house. It'll have its own driveway, garage, so it's all parked on site. This isn't, an apartment complex with parking lots. It's driveways, garages, parking each site.
How many spots do each home have then?
I'll let Mr. Greco speak to that, but my understanding is it a double garage? Is it four? So four. So it's a two-car garage and then two spaces in front from the driveway. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. So looking at the next slide, you saw this a moment ago, but again, talking about land use pattern, zoning only tells us half the story. We can't always conceptualize what does that CZPD mean over there? What does that RS30 mean over here? So I've popped in here not only our proposed site plan, but some existing approved site plans that you heard mentioned in the staff report. So to the northwest, that's the approved Green Ridge Twin Home Development. It used to be known as the Troublesome Creek Project, but it's 44 twin homes that sit nestled in that acreage there to the northwest. So that's what that PD district residential looks like to the northwest across the creek. To the east, on the property immediately adjacent, that's zoned CZ, conditional zoning RS30. So what does that look like in context? This is it. You see the homes laid out, again, all snugged in south of that creek corridor, and in and around the environmental enclaves that you see there. Looking at the subject property, it's the L, upside down L, of course, and you see the site plan stuck in there. You see where it sits below the creek corridor. You see the top 2/3 where the L turns, has no development, homes or lots on it. The road doesn't go that far, and you see how it accesses the road, and really is a minimal coverage of the 39 acres with the proposed project. That's how we get that low 14% built upon area. That's how you get that nice proportionality that results in committed, actual, by law, preserved open space. So without a firm commitment that you can deliver with this type of zoning, it's ad hoc, it's piecemeal as it comes in. You can develop it as you go. But with the firm zoning, this is it. This is the furthest extent of what can happen. So the full 39.04 acres is included and committed to, even though only that bottom third actually is touched, and would have vertical homes on it. So again, here just showing the consistency of that land use pattern and how it's continuing to provide some residential optionality in an appropriate fashion, curtailed, scaled, in keeping with the low density, but providing it along this major corridor where people already want to be and have to be, to go to school, to go to work, to travel east, west, north, south, to go to the park. This is a community where people could walk over and enjoy the walking trails. When I pulled up tonight about 6:30, there was everything going on out there. Groups meeting to walk, soccer practice. There's looked to be some sort of fitness class going on in the cabana, tennis games, pickup basketball. This is clearly a community hub, so why not create opportunities where people can live near that awesome asset that the town has, and they can go over there and make use of this great facility. Not to mention go grab a bite to eat or go to work. If we could go to the next slide, please. Your comprehensive plan consistency. This also was mentioned in the staff report. This is pulled from your future land use map. You can see what was described. So it looks more kind of white beige here, but that's your residential future land use designation. The gold is your town core designation. The swath that follows 158 is that professional manufacturing corridor. It only covers the bottom, first 200 feet? Yeah, the front 200 feet of the property, which, as you heard Mr. Greco say in the previous case, doesn't even get you into the wide part of the property. So it's only about 60 feet of the front of this property that's inside that corridor. The balance of it, the majority of it, is residential, which is, of course, how I think Mr. Tu arrived at his recommendation of consistency. I would go further and submit that this is better than a directive for industrial here. We do have some industrial to the east, as you can see there. You're familiar with it. We've looked at it on all the maps. You all know it. I believe that, since this has been done, as I look at your development and growth and the land use pattern that has come about since this plan was adopted in 2007, I see this great park amenity here. I see the town hall complex here. I see all the other residential development. And I see that continuing industrial all the way up to those things is not a transitional land use pattern. Bringing industrial all the way to the doorstep of the elementary school, your town park, all of your new residential development is not a tried and true planning land use pattern. Instead, you would want to taper that down and step down from industrial into your town core, into your recreation and more people-centric, focused, walkable types of land uses. So the residential product being submitted here certainly does meet that transitional planning concept, and I think better speaks to the continuity of your entire future land use plan rather than trying to be a slave to 60 feet of industrial area. Also, your scenic corridor is still here. That's the pink dashed line. That doesn't go anywhere. So the controls that the scenic corridor establishes are still in play and would still be applied to the project either way, regardless of use. If we go to the next slide, please. Just looking at what do we mean when we say twin homes? A twin home, by definition, in your ordinance, it's a single family house that is attached in one place. It's platted on its own lot. So it's not multifamily, it's not a duplex, it is a twin home. Side by side, separate front doors, separate platted lots, a separate deed for each owner that owns each side. So it really looks very much like a single family house. This is an illustrative example. If we could just kind of click through You can see several iterations of it. This is very similar to the design and inspiration of the project to the northwest. I believe that's Green Ridge. Is that right, Avery? Green Ridge.
Greenstone Ridge, or
Say again?
Greenstone Ridge?
Greenstone Ridge, the Troublesome Creek project that was approved last year. So again, when we say twin homes, the goal isn't to have this dramatic departure from the spacing, the massing, the feel, the look, the expectation of people who live in Stokesdale now and want to continue to live here, and people who want to move here. It's meant to still provide and address those same people who want to be here, but to do so in a way that meets different needs. Maybe you want a smaller lot to take care of. Maybe you want to have your exterior maintenance covered by your HOA so that you're not having to handle those things. So as your needs change, the goal of a thriving community, the goal to be able to keep the residents you do have as their needs change, and to be able to attract new residents that may have different goals and objectives, but to do so in a way that maintains the character, the look, the feel, and all the things that everyone loves about Stokesdale. So that's what these twin homes seek to do, just to provide a little bit of a different format to have that same nice neighborhood, nicely maintained common space, pull up into your own driveway, walk into your own front door kind of living. Let's see if we have one more slide. Yep. So to summarize the requested rezoning, it's CZPDR. So highly curtailed, highly funneled to make it very reasonable in that it creates or continues, as you've seen, a more desirable land use transition pattern, stepping down from that industrial to the east into a residential context that can deliver a population to shop at the goods and services available, to walk over to the town park, to work in all the places on Highway 158, or if you do need to drive, to get in your car and immediately be on the major thoroughfares and arterials to go east, west, north, south. So it's a highly appropriate location to place some appropriate housing opportunities and to step down from that industrial use that we see to the east. It's largely consistent with the town's adopted comprehensive plan. 95% of the site is residential, and this, of course, is a residential proposal, and it is in keeping with that RS40 standard of less than 1.2 units per acre. Where it is inconsistent, that tiny little swath at the front, again, I would submit to you that perhaps since 2007, in the intervening years, as the town has grown and developed and town core has come more east, I think that there could be a very reasonable basis to think that this residential standard being carried all the way to 158 is more reasonable than applying the industrial all the way through to some of your other non-compatible uses. It provides high-quality, desirable housing optionality that's very much needed to reach a more diverse home buyer with changing needs. So again, not a more diverse home buyer because we're trying to change what everyone likes about Stokesdale, but we're trying to keep people in Stokesdale who like Stokesdale. So we want to be able to meet their needs at all phases of life. It's the highest and best use of a challenging piece of property. You've seen it. It's narrow. It has small frontage. It's got steep topography. It's got streams. It's got wetlands. So how do we make use of a piece of property like that in a way that's meaningful and can contribute? For all the reasons we've talked about, this project does that. It preserves environmental features and open space in a locked-in, hard, firm commitment way. It doesn't say, oh, let's do one lot now and then see what happens. It says, nope, the entire 39.04 acres is committed to only develop to this extent, and therefore you get that meaningful breadth and open space distinction between further AG properties to the north. You get that baked in black and white as part of the regulatory law for this property. So you know that it becomes a predictable and reliable aspect of your zoning scheme. So with that, Mr. Greco's here. He can answer any additional questions you may have about the site plan. Mr. Kami Johnson and the rest of his team is here if you have more questions about the vision and intent. And of course, I'm willing to answer any questions as well. We also look forward to any dialogue that we hear from anyone else here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak for or against this rezoning? Any questions from, I'm sorry? Sure.
Would you step up to the podium, please, and identify yourself?
Right
At the
there,
podium.
We need your name and address, please.
I'm Mike Sharon. I live at 7910. Excuse me. Which I will probably be affected more than anybody there, because where that right of way goes into the property goes right beside me, which is a narrow one. I've had dealings with Kevin. I've had dealings with Connie. I'm 100% no problem with anything they do. But I will tell you, when the narrowness of what she's already said, with the road going from going into the right by me, which would get going right by my house, and this might be ahead of the game, but will it be anything for as far as barrier for noise and stuff going into the property?
Anybody wish to address that question?
So can we go to the site plan slide, please?
And one other thing, let me just finish what I was going to say. Also, the letter that we got, it showed that it would be the multi-house like this, but it also said that it would be on it that you could do, let me get this right. Duplex, yes, I'm sorry. I can't have talk tonight, but anyway, that do show that, and that raises big questions with me. I believe anything that these fellas tell me, but if anything ever changes, land they sell out or whatever, it might be a question there. So if we're sticking with this plan, I'm for it. But if we're doing duplexes, I got a problem.
These are duplexes, aren't they?
No, they're twin homes.
Twin homes? What's the difference between a two?
They are attached like a duplex, but under North Carolina state law, they are twin attached homes.
Who takes
Want to get you here?
Well, I just want to answer your question, but
Okay.
we'll wait till you're finished.
Nah, I'm pretty much finished. That
Yeah.
like I say, and it also, since I'm living right there at the house, I know by the turning lanes done at the other development of what's got to be done, how far are we coming in on me?
We don't know that till we go to DOT.
Yeah, okay. Well, I figured that. Kevin, I was jumping the gun. Okay. But I figured I was jumping the gun. But the question, being it's coming right beside me. If y'all were living right beside a place where you got traffic coming in to the house that's coming right by your bedroom, you'd probably want to quieten it up some too. So
We know it's going to be.
yeah. Well, it is what it is. But
But it's going to be nice, high quality.
well, that's what I figured. That's the reason why I said I had no problem with that. But when the town sent me and threw that duplex in there, and I mean, I hate to say, but I've sold you land to do duplexes. so I'm sitting here probably biting off more than a chew, but I did what I said I would do.
On track. Are you finished now?
Yes, I'm through.
Sir.
Thank you, Mike.
All right.
Anybody else wish to speak? Questions?
Mr. Chairman, I guess since in the previous hearing, there was statements attributed to Chief Galden, who wasn't present in the room, so if you wanted him to maybe address that,
That would be good.
that might be an option for you if you
Yes.
wanted to.
Just point of order, do you want me to answer that while it's fresh on your minds?
Yes, please.
Great. So
Todd will ask you
as
up.
was mentioned in the back and forth, and that was Mr. Kevin Combs, who's one of the partners of COMI and KRC, and would be making decisions about the development. But, the road, when the driveway permits come in, when all the rigorous review is done, and the road is actually cited, that would be the time to go back and look at how close is it, what are the impacts, and then address it with, landscaping, is a fence appropriate? What is it that would do the best job of mitigating that change and impact that's being described? So, it's certainly appropriate to raise it tonight, get it on everybody's radar, but we don't have a site plan detail. Again, that's why the UDP is not that specific yet, because we don't want to, say, okay, there's going to be a fence here and a Bradford pear there and a crepe myrtle here, and then have to come back if something shifts. So that all happens through, if the project were to go forward, through the subsequent site planning, and that can be done even with input from Mr. Sharon, as we know more about where that road sits. And the fire chief. As far as the language terminology, so importantly, and Mr. Winfrey can weigh in on this, we have to follow the definitions of your ordinance. The dispositive, the definition that matters here is twin home. Twin home is how your ordinance describes what in common vernacular, us just talking amongst ourselves, we may have in the past called a duplex. Duplex, some people may envision all kinds of different things. So that's why we don't use just common vernacular and, the way we talk amongst ourselves. We use definitions from your ordinance. So if we need to strike duplex from our application to eliminate any confusion, we're happy to do that, because the defined term, the actual permitted use that we are seeking, is twin home. And that means two separately platted lots that just share that one common line, that have, as I've described, separate front doors, separate driveways, separate deeds. They are single-family yes. They're single-family, both in the building code, in the town's UDO. They are just a twin home variety of single-family, I guess is the best way to put that.
Okay, I've got a question based on that. Who takes care, I heard somebody saying that the HOA will take care of all exteriors?
That's to be decided, but yes, that's typically how it's done in these communities.
Definitely all the maintenance and like roofing and painting to keep it looking new and fresh, all along. We won't be building these, the vertical construction, but, our first one, we're trying to get all the permits down to come up out of the ground. We don't know exactly all the nuances in there, how that's gonna work, but we're trying to make it completely maintenance-free on the exterior.
I was wondering about how you...
Which means the yard should be consistently mowed, shrubs, consistently cut, and any exterior problems with roofing, siding, or painting should, stay looking fresh.
I was wondering how you handle a roof with one side wants a new roof and the other side doesn't want a new roof.
It won't work that way. It'll be the whole building.
That's how it functions, like single family. It's really, a single structure, which is why the building code calls it single family.
Okay.
It won't be like some duplexes that you see at the beach where somebody just paints down the middle of a 8x8 column, and the other side's not painted.
So
that won't be allowed.
Right, all exterior work is done by the HOA.
Yes, and unless it's like an accident or insurance claim, like somebody drives into a garage or something like that, but the maintenance part, yes.
Thank you. Any questions other? Okay, now, Chief, I'm not sure what you heard, but we made a waiver with conditions.
Okay.
And anybody want to tell them what the conditions were?
Todd, the two conditions were that the developer work with our local fire department where an additional fire extinguisher may or may not be needed, and/or I'm sorry, what did I say?
Extinguisher.
Well, yes, okay. Big. Or a turnaround in the existing roadway. Again, based on the recommendation of the fire department, so you have some say in this.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for allowing. I'm Todd Gallen, Chief Stokesdale Fire Department, 8401 Highway 158. And Robbie sent me an email saying that y'all may have some questions or some concerns, something that you could ask. And I actually had the opportunity to meet with Kevin and Kami to talk about some concerns that we had, and some things that if they would work in the plan would certainly help us should we have a fire down there, because this is going to be something that's new to us as well. We want to make sure that we got all the tools that we need to mitigate, especially a fire. We've never had buildings that are this close together, so we want to make sure we got adequate water. We talked to them about upsizing the water lines to make sure that we've got the gallons per minute. If we needed an additional hydrant, which we're working with them on that, and the turnaround. Those were the three big things that we wanted to talk to them about. And I think we left there all in agreement with, yes, all of those could be done, but there was no need for us to get too deep into it until they saw whether this was going to pass or not. And then we could go back to the drawing board, all of us working on it, and try to get it right the first time so that we didn't have to keep going back and forth on these sketches. So, yes, we have been, like I say, we met once, and then Tommy and I met a second time to talk about turnaround, maybe even relocating it to coincide with the hydrants and the use and all. And I explained to them, actually I had a whole list of questions I asked, and the reason we were asking for some of these things, basically with it being one way in, one way out. But the fact that we've got water in there makes a big difference, opposed to us having to truck water in, which then you're talking about probably needing more than one turnaround. So I guess that we're kind of on hold till we see what you guys decide, and then we'll go back to work with Tommy and Kevin.
Well, actually, the condition was they have to work with you.
Yes.
I have a question about trucks. You said multiple vehicles.
Yes.
Now, if you have a ambulance call, now you've got 3 vehicles there, aren't you?
Yeah, the nice thing,
Experience.
yeah, the nice thing about those smaller vehicles are, and I asked that specific question, so if they're going to be 10 by 30, then we can back those up into the driveway up very close to the garage door. If we have to in an emergency, we'll use the neighbors to put one truck in and one truck in if we have to, the smaller ones. Unfortunately, if it's a fire, the larger trucks, we're not going to be able to do that. And they just take up so much space. But there's nothing we can do about that. That is what it is. If it happens out here on 158, we're going to take up a certain amount of space. So, yes, the smaller trucks, we will be able to work those in the driveways and stuff.
And Steve, one thing different about this than our regular single-family bigger lot neighborhoods, this will have curb and gutter. It will not have a ditch. So they will be easy to pull off the road and go up to the house or whatever it may be, with it not being a ditch.
Right. And how wide are these roads?
They will be 20 foot edge of pavement to edge of pavement.
26. They have curb and gutters 26 face to face.
20, so it'll be 26 feet between
Face of
curb.
Well, that's because you got the little bottom of the curb for the drain.
Right. I understand that.
20 feet back.
I'm thinking about cars parked all over the place and getting in and out.
Homeowners Association probably wouldn't allow street parking.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, if somebody get an Uber Eats or something like that, not long term, no.
So it's interesting you brought that up. That was one of the things we talked about strategically putting a turnaround is someone may own a boat and they park their boat or put a basketball goal in there and we need it. And
Sow grass over it,
Yeah.
it looks like open space, so it's not inviting people to use it or put a basketball goal there.
Good. That's what we're here for. We're looking for the future.
Suppose you got your fire trucks in there about halfway down, and fire trucks are not easy to turn around, they're not easy to park.
Right.
And then somebody down on the lower end of that place has a heart attack, and you gotta get ambulances down in there.
so that's one of those situations where hopefully we have got enough people that's not committed to one, they would go down. You would just have to walk in.
And another thing too, on this has got the newer 96-foot radius cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
Too. So they can go down there without doing a 3-point turn with their biggest fire truck and circle.
Yeah, but usually on a scene, if you've got a house fire, you ain't got just one truck, you got 3 or 4 trucks sitting there. They're gonna block the road going in.
You're absolutely true.
Yep, you're right. Because they're 2 story, story and a half. Summerfield has a ladder truck. I actually called and talked to them to make sure that should we need it, let's hope that we never do, but what they need for full setup on that. So to fit in there, they need 18 feet. So we'll have enough with 26 feet that if we ever had to set an aerial device up, we would have the room in there to be able to set it up in the street. But anytime you've got one way in and one way out, you run that risk. And if something happens, I got to be honest with you, we actually had that to happen in another community. It was not ours. We were assisting them. And their street dead-ended into a cul-de-sac, but the fire was in about a 4,000 square foot house in a street that dead-ended the cul-de-sac. The only thing you could do to get in was you had to drive, because a lot of equipment was staged in the cul-de-sac. You had to drive in and back out. So you could only do, well, actually, we were able to get it where you could do 2 trucks at a time. One would wait, one would back up, one would pull in, and then you had to wait. So in any of them, it doesn't matter where it's at. It takes coordination, and it's a totally different operation. And as we were telling Tommy and Kevin, that was one of the big reasons we wanted to talk to them about a turnaround here was should something ever happen, given the size of those and the close proximity, and the town's water system was not providing enough, we would have the opportunity to set up the operations where we could tank water in to supplement the town system.
Good, so you're satisfied?
Sure. I mean, I can't stop them, like I said, it's one of those things where we learn to work around, and if we can get with the developers and we can get with them soon enough to tell them our concerns, sit down, show them, they have an understanding of why we're asking for what we're asking. And I think most people sincerely care about the safety. You're building something, you want everybody in that particular development, street, whatever, to be safe. And, I think everybody's for doing the right thing to make sure that entire neighborhood is as safe as it can be.
That's our goal.
That's why we wanted you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
All right. Any other questions from the board? We've heard everybody. Chair will entertain. Now, this is a recommendation to town council. Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the,
You want to close the public hearing?
Oh, we're not a public hearing, are we?
That was
we didn't announce a public hearing, but yes.
that was a public hearing, yes.
Oh, all right. Sorry about that. Let's close the public hearing then. Chair will entertain a motion for it.
I make a motion to close the hearing, so the open hearing.
Second.
Mr. Curtis seconds it. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Hearing is closed.
I'd like to make a motion that the rezoning case number 2601 PLBD 00002 AG Agricultural to CZPDR conditional zoning planned unit development be approved.
Second?
I'll second.
Mr. Curtis seconds. Mrs. Mailer? Yea or nay? No, okay.
No.
Mr. Crawford?
Yay.
Mr. Southern?
Aye.
Mr. Curtis?
Aye.
And I also vote aye.
Very good.
Passes. All right. Next item on the agenda is public comment period. Anybody wish to speak? Give their name and address. Nobody wanting to speak? Chair will entertain a motion to...
You'll do your announcements.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Town Planning Board announcements. Next regular Stokesdale Town Council meeting is scheduled for Thursday, May 14th at 7 p.m. inside the Town Hall Council Chambers. The next regular Stokesdale Town Planning Board meeting is scheduled for Thursday, May 28th, 2026 at 7 PM. Here again. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to make a motion we adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Southern seconds. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you all.
You can stay here.
Talk to me.
I think they do this stuff all by